Okay, so you think you know about cults, right?
Yeah, maybe a little.
Yeah, like those groups out in the middle of nowhere with weird robes and strange beliefs.
Uh-huh.
But what if I told you that's just the tip of the iceberg?
Oh, really?
That cults are way more common than you think. And their influence, it reaches far beyond like those sensational headlines you see sometimes.
I'm listening.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into this world of cults.
Yeah.
We're going to try to unpack their destructive influence.
Okay, cool.
And, you might be surprised, like really surprised, to learn how deeply cults can actually impact individuals and families, even society as a whole.
Interesting. So where do we even start?
Well, let's start with the research. It suggests that the destruction, it often begins at a really personal level, with like the systematic dismantling of a person's identity.
Okay, so it's not like that classic Hollywood brainwashing.
Not exactly.
Mhm.
It's, I think it's much more subtle, a process called coercive persuasion.
Coercive persuasion. Whoa.
Yeah, it sounds kind of intense, right?
Yeah.
But how is it different from like the regular persuasion we face every day?
You see, think about it like ads, right? They try to persuade you to buy something.
Yeah.
But this coercive persuasion thing, this goes deeper, much deeper. It's like a calculated manipulation of, well, everything. A person's environment, their relationships, even basic needs like sleep or food.
Wow. So they're like totally controlling everything.
It's all designed to break down their critical thinking, and then replace it with the cult's ideology.
So it's like they slowly chip away at someone's sense of self until but they totally depend on the group for everything, like how they see the world.
Exactly. Imagine constantly hearing the group's doctrine, being told that they have the only truth,
Wow.
that the outside world is dangerous, that everyone else is against you. It creates such a strong sense of isolation and dependence.
It's kind of sad when you think about the families. All the pain and confusion when someone they love gets caught up in this web of, manipulation.
The emotional toll on families is huge. The research really highlights this. Broken ties, years spent trying to reach someone who's lost in this other reality.
It's more than emotional manipulation, though, isn't it?
Right.
Cults they're famous for exploiting their members financially. I mean, with devastating results.
Oh, absolutely. The source material has some shocking examples, like demanding followers give up all their money or pressuring them to take out loans they can't afford.
Just so they control the money, too.
It tightens their grip, makes it almost impossible to leave.
This exploitation, it's not just hurting individuals, right?
Yeah.
What about the bigger economic picture? What are the implications there?
Well, cults can really mess up entire financial systems. They'll do shady business, things like multi-level marketing schemes, preying on vulnerable people, or even using their followers' money for these elaborate investment scams, just leaving a trail of financial ruin.
Wow, it's kind of scary to think about how big this is, this whole financial exploitation thing. With cults, we often hear about like the extreme stuff, the mass suicides, the standoffs with the police.
Mm-hmm.
But this financial angle, it's a whole other level of messed up.
Yeah, it really shows that cults aren't just about weird beliefs or some charismatic leader. They're like well-organized machines. They're
Yeah.
made to exploit and control people, on all these different levels, including their money.
And what's really interesting to me? It's how cults manage to create such intense loyalty, such devotion in their followers. Like, what are they doing to make this us versus them thing? That seems so important to how they control people.
Well, they often start by cutting people off from their old support systems, like family and friends.
Okay.
They discourage contact. They say the outside world is dangerous, that it's corrupt. And they emphasize how the group has this unique, exclusive truth or path to enlightenment.
So they're building like a bubble
Yeah.
where the cult becomes the only place you feel like you belong, the only place you can trust.
Exactly. And inside that bubble, they use all these psychological tricks to make sure everyone conforms and obeys.
Uh-huh.
Like, have you heard of love bombing?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
They shower new recruits with like tons of affection, make them feel so special and accepted.
It's kind of like manipulation, right? But with good vibes.
It's like a twisted form of, positive reinforcement. And then on the other side, there's the punishment. Like they'll use public shaming or shunning to punish anyone who questions the group's teachings or the leader.
So they're basically creating an environment where people are just afraid to speak up.
Totally. A climate of fear and self-censorship where no one dares to have any doubts.
This is where it gets really disturbing for me,
Yeah.
because we're talking about people being stripped of who they are, their ability to think for themselves, to make their own choices. It's almost like they're imprisoned, but it's their minds.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And the saddest part is, this kind of manipulation, it creates an environment where even criminal activity can happen. The source material, it talks about some truly horrific examples of abuse and exploitation in cults.
We're talking like sexual abuse, forced labor, even violence against members who try to leave.
Yes, and it's important to remember that these things, they're not just the actions of a few bad people, it's the cult stricture. The
Right.
way they demand total obedience to the leadership, it creates a context where these horrible acts can be justified, even encouraged.
This is the part of the conversation that's always hard for me. It's so easy to think, oh, that would never happen to me. But the reality is, cults, they take advantage of basic human needs. The need to belong, to find meaning, to have answers to the big questions in life.
You're so right, and that's exactly why it's so important to be open about these issues. The more we know about how cults work, the better we can protect ourselves and those we care about.
Okay, so let's talk about those warning signs. What should people be looking for? What are the red flags that someone might be getting pulled into a cult?
Well, one of the biggest ones is isolation, like we talked about. If someone you know starts pulling away from their usual friends, being secretive, or saying extreme things that just seem out of character, that's a concern.
What about their personality or
Mm,
their behavior? Does that change?
definitely. They might become really submissive, especially to a specific person or group. Or maybe their values and beliefs suddenly change, their lifestyle choices, things that just don't fit with who they used to be.
Okay, so let's say you notice these red flags in someone you care about. How do you even approach that? I mean, it must be so hard to have a rational conversation with someone who's been, like, totally indoctrinated.
It's tricky, that's for sure. And there's no easy solution. But one thing you definitely don't want to do is be confrontational or judgmental.
Okay.
Because people in cults, they're often victims, they've been manipulated, they might genuinely believe the group is the only path to truth.
So instead of arguing with them, what's a better way?
Start by telling them you're concerned about them, that you care and you're worried about the changes you're seeing, and just listen without judgment.
So it's like gently encouraging them to think critically without pushing them further into the cult.
Exactly. Ask open-ended questions that might make them think about their beliefs, about what the group is doing, like, what do you think would happen if you disagreed with their teachings? Or how has being in this group affected your relationships with your family and friends?
Those are good questions. What about professional help? When should you get a therapist involved? Someone who specializes in cults.
If you're worried about someone's safety or their mental health, or if they're showing signs of distress, getting professional help is a good idea.
This whole conversation has really made me realize how sneaky cults can be. It's easy to think they're just fringe groups with strange ideas, but they're so much more complex and dangerous than we often realize.
I agree. And the impact they have on individuals, families, even society as a whole, it's really profound and often devastating. We've talked about the psychological manipulation, the financial exploitation, the isolation, and even the possibility of criminal activity. It's a lot to take in.
It is, but it's important to remember that there's hope. People can and do escape from cults, and there are resources to help them heal and rebuild their lives. It's crazy, right? Like how these cults can slip under the radar. They're not always so obvious, with the crazy leaders and weird rituals. Sometimes they're just like part of our communities hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, they're good at blending in. Like they might look like a harmless self-help group or a spiritual retreat, even a business.
Right. So it's even harder to spot the manipulation. And that's what's kind of scary to me. It makes you think anyone could be vulnerable to this. We tend to think, oh, cult members, they must be gullible or weak.
Uh-huh.
But it's not true. Cults target all kinds of people, even those who are successful and educated.
Absolutely. Cults, they tap into those basic human needs. The need to connect, to find meaning, to have a purpose.
Yeah.
And they offer these simple answers to really complex questions. They promise belonging, certainty in a world that often feels so chaotic.
Exactly. It's like they're selling this perfect life, a path to like enlightenment.
Right.
But it comes with a huge cost.
Right.
You give up your individuality, your ability to think for yourself, and often even your closest relationships.
And that's why we need to talk about this. We have to educate ourselves and others about the dangers, the tactics they use.
So we can spot the warning signs
That-
and protect ourselves.
Exactly.
You know, something that really surprised me in the research was how cults can actually infiltrate political systems. It's like their influence, it goes way beyond just manipulating individuals.
It's true. Cults, they understand that political power can help them, make their operations seem legitimate or push for policies that support their agenda.
So it's not just about controlling people, it's about controlling systems too.
Right.
How do they even do that? How do they get that political influence?
Well, they might encourage their members to vote a certain way or support certain candidates. They might get involved in lobbying, donating to campaigns, or even try to place their own members in government positions.
Like a sneaky takeover. They work their way into these power structures, and then slowly they start pulling the strings.
It's a good way to put it, and it highlights how important it is to be informed, to be engaged citizens.
Right.
We have to be aware of how cults can influence politics.
To question what we're being told.
Yeah.
And to hold our leaders accountable.
Exactly.
This whole deep dive has been, well, really eye-opening. I mean, cults are way more common and complex than I think a lot of people realize.
Yeah.
Their influence, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
In our families, communities, financial systems, even our governments.
And as we've discussed, the consequences can be truly devastating. But, the good news is knowledge is power. The more we understand about cults, the better we can protect ourselves and the people we care about.
So what's the most important thing for our listeners to remember? What do you want them to take away from this?
I think it's be vigilant. Trust your gut. If something feels manipulative, if it feels controlling, question it. Remember, cults, they thrive on secrecy. So shining a light on what they do is one of the best ways to fight back.
And if you see someone you love, someone you care about, showing those warning signs, don't be afraid to reach out. Offer support. Encourage them to get help.
Yes, early intervention is so important. It's about being aware, being informed, and being there for each other.
We can't just ignore this. We have to be proactive, educate ourselves and our communities, so we can stand up to the influence of cults and build a society that values critical thinking, individual freedom, and healthy relationships.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, this has been a really, really fascinating conversation. I think we've all learned a lot about how dangerous and widespread cults really are.
Absolutely. And I think it's a topic we need to keep talking about. It's only through awareness, education, and open dialogue that we can truly fight back against cults and protect ourselves and the people we care about.
Stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.